BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast, where we hear how farmers, looking into how much inheritance tax they might owe, are queuing up to get an assessment with their agricultural valuer. And how is the clear-up going after Storm Eowyn?
There's one block of sort of more commercial forestry, and to be honest with you, it looks like a bunch of giants have gone in there and played a game of rugby. I mean, it's flattened.
A lot of work to do there. We'll hear more about that in just a moment. First, though, all week we're marking 5 years since we officially left the EU and talking about the transition to new agricultural policies and how they vary in each part of the UK. In Wales, the Sustainable Farming Scheme, or SFS, should start being rolled out in 2026 after years of negotiation between farmers, environmentalists and the Welsh Government. It'll replace the old EU payments, and to gain access to the funding, farms will have to sign up to 12 so-called universal actions. These range from soil health planning and habitat maintenance to continuous professional development. Emma Robinson moved to Wales from Bedfordshire 11 years ago with her family and is now county chair for NFU Cymru in Monmouthshire. She took BBC Wales environment correspondent Stefan Messenger for a walk around her farm near Abergavenny to chat through all things SFS.
We've got about 380 acres and we're a mixed farming enterprise with 100 head of Holstein dairy cows and 400 head of North Country mules and Clyn sheep, and we grow a variety of arable crops that we feed back to the livestock, and we're only a small family unit that does it. There's 4 of us. Right, we're now in the cubicle house with the cows. They're in at the minute, sort of all having a little bit of lunch before we then sort of milk them again in the afternoon.
Well, Emma, you and your husband Robert relocated here, didn't you, to Monmouthshire, cows and all, in 2014, 2 years before the vote to leave the EU and everything that triggered in terms of this big shake of agricultural subsidies.
Yes.
And obviously we know all the different parts of the UK have been working up their own plan, and you've become very familiar with the Welsh Government's approach.
Well, it's been quite a roller coaster, I think, really. Obviously, this scheme is very different to our basic payment scheme we had before. It's very environmentally led. There's all the universal actions you've got to contribute to into the scheme. So there's, woodland creation, there's habitat, there's hedgerow. There's also things around herd health and management. Obviously, they're thinking about bringing in sort of carbon calculation as well. There's lots to think about before you get to that stage in 26 where you have to tick a box, and it's either I stay in BPS and it's phased out, or I tick a box and go into the SFS.
For some farmers that won't be a decision, will it, because they're reliant on that public subsidy?
The basic payment scheme was a support payment for agriculture. It was there to help you, I think, and support you through like the difficult times in farming. We have got to work with the climate. We know how difficult it is as farmers, and it can be done. But I think each business has got to see for themselves whether that's something that is viable for them to go into it. And then we have to look at the financial implications of it, if it's going to be enough money.
Because that is one of the unanswered questions at the moment, isn't it? Is budget.
Budget, yeah, that's it. We don't know the budget.
So, Emma, we've come to the other end of the farm now, and we're stood out here looking at a sloping field where I think there's some woodland at the top, but it's such a misty day that we can't actually quite see that. But you were saying, this is your next venture.
Basically, that woodland was put in to be managed, to have timber, come off of it when it was planted probably in the late 70s. So we're looking at obviously doing what we call a clear fell, but we have to have licences for that. We have to do an awful lot of paperwork. So I'm hoping we can be successful in that, to do a fell, replant with species that will work in harmony with nature. Then it will be a stepping stone for the future, really, for our children, because that will be something they can do long term. And hopefully, if it can work with one of the universal actions in the scheme, that would be a big tick.
We're standing here in the sort of thick fog. It's sort of like a metaphor, isn't it, for what the last few years have been like for you as farmers, looking into the future, not really knowing what it holds in terms of the public funding for farming. What's that been like?
It's been very difficult. We came out of Brexit. It's impacted us on many different fronts, unfortunately. And I think just the time frame of how long it's taken has been frustrating.
Are you hopeful that the sustainable farming scheme is going to work for the majority?
We've still got a little way to go to fine-tune everything, but I hope they can come to an agreement and we can have a scheme that can provide those payments for support. So, farmers can keep farming. That's really important. The next generation can. If we can do that, working hand in hand with nature, that will hopefully be good for the future, for all of us and for our children and for their children.
Emma Robinson there. Now, as we've been reporting since the budget in October, farmers have been coming to terms with the introduction of inheritance tax on their businesses. The tax changes mean many farmers are now trying to work out how much money they might owe the government when the changes come into force next year. They've been getting in touch with their local agricultural valuers, who are often auctioneers too, to work the sums out. Sarah Swadling's been hearing from the perspective of the auctioneer's rostrum.
Holsworthy Market is a busy livestock market in northwest Devon, not that far from the border with Cornwall. It's run by Kivels, who've been auctioneers since the 19th century. And the man with the gavel in the store cattle ring today is David Kivell. He's a consultant for the firm.
Holsworthy Market's backbone is family farms. 90% of our customers are family farms.
Is your phone ringing more now for valuations, for people wanting their farms valued?
Families just want to be reassured of what they're actually worth. We're bringing in other assets now, like a dairy herd, machinery, crops in store. It's not just about the land, the farm buildings and the farmhouse.
What's it like delivering the news now about what a farm is worth? Because, back in the day, you might think high value good news. Now, high value not such good news.
Yes, it's always been an enjoyable experience to tell someone what their farm is worth, but it's a positive note, isn't it? They're still seeing value on their farms at present, and some are surprised by the figures.
A lot of people are predicting that one of the effects of this change in inheritance tax is that people are going to be forced to sell more land or sell off some of their livestock to pay the inheritance tax. Now, does that mean more work potentially for the auctioneers and potentially, good times for the auctioneers?
Well, you could look at it that way, but I think on the whole, the concern is if land has to be sold in order to pay inheritance tax, capital gains tax comes into play. And capital gains tax has always been a bit of a staller on people selling land. So I don't think we're gloating on the fact that we're going to be busier. My message to the government would be, don't bite the hand that feeds you, because that's what they've done.
Do you think that it's going to shake down to be as bad as some fear?
I've got to stay positive. There are ways of dealing with this. There's trusts, there's insurance, there are all sorts of mechanisms that can be put in place. And the important thing is the generation which it's going to affect now are thinking about this. They're being brought home to them by their families. We need to think about this, and they are making plans, which is good.
I was thinking as I was driving over here that this part of the southwest has been at the brunt of several crises. BSE, yep. We're in a TB hotspot, bovine TB hotspot here. It was at the absolute epicentre of the 2001 foot and mouth outbreak in the southwest. All those things were predicted to be the end of farming by some commentators. How does this situation with inheritance tax compare to those, do you think?
It's a good question, and I very often think that throughout my whole 40-year career, we've been saddled with disaster after disaster after disaster, but we're dealing with a huge resilient bunch. They are tremendously resilient. Everyone says, there'll be lots of farms on the market next year after BSE, and like you say, foot and mouth. Everybody thought, they'll leave the industry, get out. No way. It's gone the other way, if anything. They've become more resilient. I don't think this will be the disaster some people have made it out to be. And they'll fight back and they'll see their way through this.
Auctioneer and valuer David Kivell talking to Sarah Swadling. The government says the reforms are needed to raise money for public services and will affect around 500 estates a year, and payments can be spread over 10 years, interest-free. As Wales and southern England have had heavy rain and wind warnings overnight for Storm Eowyn, farmers across Northern Ireland, Northern England and Scotland are still clearing up after the devastation caused last Friday by Storm Eowyn. Well, much of the clear-up is being done by farmers and estate workforces, many of whom have spent days clearing local public roads of fallen trees. William Wombwell is a farm manager on a large estate near Perth, which has arable, broadleaf woodland and commercial forestry. He told me the high winds caused havoc, which they're still working to clear.
Look, I'm an East Anglian boy and I've come up, so it's a real shock for me. They said it could get windy up in Scotland and crikey, it certainly can. I don't actually know an exact figure on how many trees have gone down, but, I'd say it's got to be high hundreds to close to 1,000. And there's one block of more commercial forestry that had been thinned. And to be honest with you, it looks like a bunch of giants have gone in there and played a game of rugby. I mean, it's flattened to unrecognisable. So there's a lot of damage to the fir trees. We lost some big oak trees, very old oak trees across the estate.
And how big a job is it to clear everything up? Because we talk about the storm comes, it causes damage, it passes, people forget about it, but you've got to clear up the debris.
Yeah, so obviously the storm was on Friday. Thankfully everybody was safe and sound. We focused on clearing public roads and left the wider estate roads for another day. They're still clearing at the moment. There's still trees been cut up that are still blocking roads, although I think, to be honest, most estate roads by the end of play today will be open. We had trees down close to houses, so we actually moved some tenants out for the day and put them in other accommodation until the storm had sort of passed, and then they're back. But the clear up still goes on. SSE, Scottish and Southern Electric, they're busy at the moment. We've still got a few properties on the estate that are without power. And the clear up continues.
How long do you think it'll take?
Well, I think the guys in the forestry team are going to be busy for, a good couple of weeks to get it all logged up and put in piles and sorted out. As for the sort of commercial forestry thing, I've got absolutely no idea. That's certainly not one of my areas of expertise. With the damage to some of the farm buildings, we're running into thousands of pounds worth of damage caused by the storm, which unfortunately, you have to just sort of take on the chin.
Is there anything that you can do on an estate to mitigate for the future or plan ahead a little bit?
From my point of view, in looking after the farm buildings and stuff, it's just getting right on top of your general maintenance. There are some things you can't do anything about. We had some roller shutter doors that were blown in. It was such strong wind. Now, that's a cost. We will look at putting brace bars behind those now. When it comes to trees, I suppose just being aware of what we've got around us, around buildings, farmyards, and yearly tree surveys, and taking any necessary measures.
William Wombwell there, farm manager near Perth. A person in the West Midlands has been confirmed as having avian flu, which they caught on a farm after close and prolonged contact with a large number of infected birds. The UK Health Security Agency says the individual is currently well and there's no evidence of onward transmission of the disease from this case. The chief vet has said this is a very rare event and is very specific to the circumstances on this premises. That's all from us today. I'm Anna Hill. The producer is Heather Simons. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.